must be!
My dad used to tell me war stories, and I was infatuated with the war. And in fact, my first 3 or 4 8mm home movies when I was 12, 13, 14, 15 years old were World War II movies. I never had a big thought about what I could do with movies in those days. I was infatuated with the control that movies gave me in creating a sequence of events or a feeling or a train wreck with 2 Lionel trains that I could then repeat and see over and over and over again. And I think it was just a realization that I could change the way I perceived life through a funnel or another medium to make it come out better for me. And when I realized I could make life better for me through this little 8mm rinky-dink medium, I felt really good about my life, myself, and possibly bringing some other people into this amazing medium to enjoy what I was putting together. And so the first thing I thought of was selfishly was myself, and the second thing I thought of was bringing an audience in to see if what I was making was having an effect on anybody other than myself. And I don't know, before they hired me, I snuck on the lot. Yeah, for a couple of years. It was 2 summers. I was in high school in Arizona, and I was out here visiting some cousins. And I took a tour one day. You know, they had the old Gray Line tours, big buses, not trams. They gave everybody a bathroom break about midday, and I got off to go to the bathroom. And I hid in the stall, and I waited until it was really quiet in the bathroom, assuming everybody had left and gotten back on the bus and left again. And I came out a half an hour later, and I was free. I was on the Universal Studios lot, had no idea how I'd get home, but spent the whole afternoon just walking in and out of doors, basically, sound stages and cutting rooms, and took my own tour and had an amazing time. Nobody stopped me. What happened was, at the end of the day, I went to borrow a telephone to call my cousin to come pick me up or figure out some way I could get back to Canoga Park, and I fortuitously borrowed the telephone of the Universal Studios film librarian, a man named Chuck Silvers, who asked me what I was doing there. I told him the story I just told you, and he laughed and thought that had a lot of chutzpah and showed ambition and showed that I really wanted to be a director, or at least I wanted to break into the business in some way. And he gave me a 3-day pass on his own name for me to come back for 3 full days with this little pink slip, the opposite of being fired, being hired in the sense, or at least being able to legally go on the lot for 3 days. And I did that for 3 days, and I wore nice clothes, because in those days, we're talking about the mid-'60s, everybody wore suits, and they looked really nice. So I wore a nice sort of bar mitzvah suit. And then I came back on the end of the 3rd day, and Chuck said he didn't have the authority to sign any more passes, and I should use my own, resources or contacts I made over the last 3 days well, nobody would, take me under their insurance umbrella and give me a chance to observe more. So I took a shot at maybe the guard would recognize me without having to show him my papers. And so on the 4th day, same clothes, walked onto the lot and waved at Scotty, the guard. Remember Scotty? Scotty waved back. And I was, the next 2.5 months during summer vacation, I was on the lot 5 days a week, every day for 2.5 months until school began, and I had to go back to Phoenix. I wrote a little script in college called Amblin about 2 kids hitchhiking from the desert to the sea, and it was a little tone poem that wasn't meant to be anything other than a love story, and it's the film that Sid Sheinberg got me into his office and offered me a 7-year term contract to direct television at Universal, and that's why I dropped out of college at the end of my sophomore year. I think when I came back on the lot, this time professionally, the first thing I realized when I moved into my official office, not my illegal office, but my legal office, was I knew where all the sound stages were, I knew where post-production was, I knew where the back lot was, I knew where all the bathrooms were, especially the one I hid in when I first got off the bus. And I felt like I had come home. I felt like Universal Studios had always been my home, was ordained to be my home for the rest of my life, and I realized I felt very, very much at home. This felt more familiar to me than the house I grew up in. That's a horrible, heinous thing to say. I love my mom and my dad and my 3 younger sisters, but this is where I felt I belonged. The fact I was doing TV, which for me was going to be kind of a USC postgraduate program on the way to making feature films, that's how I regarded television. It was a learning process. I had never directed anything professionally. The crew on my film numbered 9, 10 kids my age. So I was making movies at 12. They were 12, 13. When I was making movies at 17, 18 in college, they were 17 and 18. Now, I was doing my first television show starring Joan Crawford, no less. And the average age of the crew that numbered well over 75, the average age of the crew was 50. And I realized that, oh my God, this was the crew that made my favorite movies of all time. This was the generation that had produced the golden age of Hollywood. And when I showed up with my acne and my long hair and the viewfinder pretentiously around my neck like some kind of a talisman that would protect me from all evil, I think they took one look at me and they said, this kid better prove himself quickly or he's out of here. Because I remember being greeted by tremendous hostility from the crew, from the motion picture crew. And the only friends I had on that first television show were my actors. Surprisingly, maybe not so surprisingly, Barry Sullivan, Tom Bosley, Joan Crawford, they were the people that backed me. And my cameraman, Dick Batchelor, was great. But the rank and file of the crew were just sending daggers my way, working as slowly as they could, not to get themselves fired, maybe to get me pushed off the show, because I wound up 4 days behind schedule on my first professional job. And the studio was yelling at me, and William Sackheim, the producer, was yelling at me, and John Badham, my other good friend, who was the associate producer, was just saying, can't you catch up a little bit? Everybody's upset. But I learned so much from doing that show. I learned immediately that I needed someday to get Final Cut, because the first thing I learned was a director in television loses control the second the director walks off the soundstage and post-production begins and editorial takes over, and then the producers get very involved in TV and kind of overcut you or recut you or second guess the cutting of the film. And I realized that, that my goal next was to make movies and to, at some point in my life, have some kind of control over the movies I make.